Welcome to the Creepy Chef's Kitchen, where fear is always on the menu. Tonight's special, stories seasoned with scares and garnished with goosebumps. Smash subscribe and ring that bell. It's your ticket to our midnight buffet of horror. Now, let's dig in. The nightmares are served. It had been 20 years since I last thought about Mike. We were inseparable as kids, the kind of best friends who shared every secret, every adventure, and every dream. That is, until the day he vanished without a trace. I can still remember the frantic search parties, the desperate pleas on local news channels, and the gradual fading of hope as days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Eventually, Mike was declared dead, another tragic statistic in our small town's history. Life, as it tends to do, moved on. I grew up, went to college, and started a career in the city. The memory of Mike became a distant echo, a bittersweet reminder of a childhood cut short. I thought I had made peace with the past, tucked it away in a corner of my mind where it couldn't hurt anymore. Then, on a chilly autumn night, everything changed. I was scrolling through my social media feed, mindlessly liking posts and ignoring notifications when a message popped up that made my heart skip a beat. The profile picture was blurry, but the name sent a jolt of electricity through my body. Mike Davidson. With trembling fingers, I opened the message. 5 simple words stared back at me. "I need your help, Caleb." I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. The message was still there, taunting me with its impossibility. My mind raced through 1,000 explanations. A cruel prank, a hacked account, a cosmic coincidence. But deep down, a part of me that I thought had died long ago stirred to life. I typed out a response, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. "Who is this? How did you find me? Where have you been all these years?" The reply came almost instantly, as if the sender had been waiting anxiously for my response. "It's really me, Caleb. I know it's hard to believe, but I need you to trust me. I'm trapped, and you're the only one who can help me escape." I stared at the screen, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Skepticism warred with hope, fear with curiosity. "Prove it," I typed back. "Tell me something only Mike would know." The response that followed sent chills down my spine. "Remember the treehouse we built in the woods behind your house? The one with the secret compartment where we hid our treasure map? You drew a skull and crossbones on it with your mom's lipstick, and we swore a blood oath never to tell anyone about it." My hands shook as I read the message. No one else could have known about that treehouse or the childish rituals we performed there. It was our sacred place, our refuge from the world. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut, vivid and visceral. "Mike," I typed, hardly daring to believe it. "Is it really you? Where are you? What happened?" The messages that followed were a mix of urgency and cryptic clues. Mike claimed he was trapped in a place between worlds, a shadowy realm where time moved differently. He couldn't explain everything, he said, partly because he didn't fully understand it himself, and partly because they might be watching. "Who are they?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of unease. "The ones who took me," Mike replied. "The ones who've been taking children for centuries. I've seen them, Caleb. I've seen what they do, and I think I know how to stop them. But I need your help. I need you to remember." That night marked the beginning of an obsession that would consume my life for the next few months. I took a leave of absence from work, much to the concern of my colleagues and family. I told them I needed time to deal with some personal issues, but the truth was far stranger than anything they could have imagined. I started by revisiting our old hometown, a place I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. As I drove down familiar streets, memories flooded back: bike rides on summer afternoons, snowball fights in winter, the sound of Mike's laughter echoing through the neighborhood. The town had changed, as all places do with time, but there was an underlying current of unease that I couldn't shake. People seemed guarded, wary of outsiders. When I mentioned Mike's name, I was met with sidelong glances and hushed whispers. I dug through old newspaper archives at the local library, piecing together a timeline of events surrounding Mike's disappearance. What I found chilled me to the bone. Mike wasn't the only child to vanish under mysterious circumstances. Over the past century, there had been a string of disappearances, all following a similar pattern. Children between the ages of 8 and 12, all last seen near the old Willow Creek Bridge on the outskirts of town. As I delved deeper into the town's history, I uncovered legends and folklore that spoke of a malevolent force that preyed on children. Some called it the Shadow Man, others the Whisperer in the Dark. The stories varied, but they all shared a common thread: a shadowy figure that lured children away with promises of adventure and magic. I shared my findings with Mike through our ongoing messages. His responses became more frantic, more urgent. "You're getting close," he wrote. "But be careful, Caleb. They know you're looking. They'll try to stop you." One night, as I was going through a box of old photographs in my parents' attic, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of Mike and me, taken the day before he disappeared. We were smiling, our arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of the Willow Creek Bridge. But it was what lurked in the background that sent shivers down my spine. Barely visible among the shadows of the trees was a figure, tall, unnaturally thin, with eyes that seemed to glow even in the grainy photograph. I had never noticed it before, but now it was impossible to unsee. It was watching us, its gaze fixed on Mike with an intensity that seemed to burn through the paper. I showed the picture to my parents, but they dismissed it as a trick of the light or a double exposure. Their reaction only deepened my resolve. I knew I was onto something big and terrifying that had been hidden for far too long. As my investigation progressed, I began to notice strange occurrences around me. Objects would move when I wasn't looking, shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, and I often felt as if I was being watched. At first, I dismissed these incidents as products of my increasingly paranoid mind, but as they intensified, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had initially imagined. I reached out to other families who had lost children over the years, piecing together a pattern that spanned decades. Many were reluctant to talk, their grief still raw even after years had passed. But a few opened up, sharing stories that echoed my own experiences. One elderly woman, Mrs. Henderson, invited me into her home. Her granddaughter had disappeared in the late 1970s, never to be seen again. As we sat in her dimly lit living room, surrounded by faded photographs and dusty knickknacks, she leaned in close and whispered, "They took her, you know, the shadow people. I saw them the night she vanished." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Can you describe what you saw?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Henderson's eyes grew distant, as if looking into the past. "It was like a tear in the world," she said, "a gap between what's real and what's not. And through that gap, I saw them. Figures made of darkness, with eyes like dying stars. They reached out and took my little Emily's hand, and she went with them willingly, as if in a trance." As I left Mrs. Henderson's house, my mind reeling from her account, I received another message from Mike. "The veil is thinning," he wrote. "They're getting stronger. You need to find the anchor point, the place where their world touches ours." I pored over maps of the town, cross-referencing locations of disappearances with local legends and folklore. All signs pointed to one place, an abandoned house on the outskirts of town, not far from the Willow Creek Bridge. The locals called it the Whisper House, and it had been the subject of ghost stories and dares for generations. As I drove out to the house, the sky darkened ominously, and a thick fog rolled in from the surrounding woods. The house loomed before me, a decrepit Victorian mansion that seemed to absorb the light around it. Paint peeled from its walls like leprous skin, and the windows stared out like hollow eyes. I steeled my nerves and approached the front door, which creaked open at my touch. The interior was a maze of dust-covered furniture and peeling wallpaper. As I moved deeper into the house, the air grew cold and heavy, filled with the musty scent of decay and something else, a cloying sweetness that made my head spin. In the kitchen, I found a door leading to the basement. It was locked, but the wood around the lock was rotted. With a few solid kicks, the door gave way, revealing a set of stairs descending into darkness. As I made my way down, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The faint sound of children's laughter, echoing from somewhere deep within the house. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and small, Cluttered rooms, discarded toys, and faded photographs littered the floor, each one a stark reminder of the lives that had been stolen. The laughter grew louder as I ventured deeper, guiding me like a macabre beacon. Finally, I came to a dead end. The wall before me was blank, but something felt off about it. I ran my hands over the surface, feeling for any irregularities. Near the bottom, my fingers caught on a small indentation. I pressed it, and with a grinding noise, a hidden door swung open. The room beyond was small and circular, its walls covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe and move in the beam of my flashlight. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested a small wooden box, intricately carved with scenes of children playing. As I approached the box, the air around me seemed to thicken, and the laughter reached a fevered pitch. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from Mike. "Don't open the box," it read. "It's a trap." But it was too late. My hand, moving as if with a will of its own, reached out and lifted the lid. A blinding light erupted from within, and I felt myself being pulled forward, falling into an endless void. When I came to, I found myself in a twisted reflection of the real world. Colors were muted and distorted, and the air was filled with whispers just beyond the edge of comprehension. And there, standing before me, was Mike, looking exactly as he had the day he disappeared, not having aged a day in 20 years. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and fear. "But now that you're here, we might have a chance." The world around us shifted and changed, landscapes melting into one another like a surrealist painting come to life. I saw echoes of our hometown, but twisted and wrong. The school where we had spent our childhood now a looming fortress of shadows. The park where we had played transformed into a nightmarish carnival. Mike explained as we moved through this strange realm, always staying one step ahead of the shadows that seemed to reach for us. He told me of the beings that had taken him and countless others, ancient entities that fed on the fear and innocence of children. They had existed for millennia, slipping between the cracks of reality to snatch their prey. But why children? I asked, my mind struggling to comprehend the horrors he described. Mike's eyes grew sad. "Because children can see the magic in the world," he said. "They believe in the impossible. These creatures use that belief, twist it to create doorways between worlds. And once a child is taken, their essence, their potential, becomes fuel for the entity's power." As we talked, I began to notice something strange. While Mike hadn't aged, there was an otherworldly quality to him now, a shimmer around the edges, as if he wasn't quite solid. "What about you?" I asked. "How have you survived all these years?" Mike's expression turned grim. "I haven't, not really," he said. "What you see is just an echo, a memory given form by the power of this place. The real me, the real me is part of them now." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The friend I had been trying to save was already gone. But as I processed this, another thought occurred to me. Then how have you been sending me messages? How did you guide me here? A sad smile played across Mike's face. "Because a part of me still exists, trapped between worlds. And that part recognized a chance for redemption when I saw you start to investigate. You were always the brave one, Caleb. I knew if anyone could unravel this mystery and put an end to the cycle, it would be you." As we talked, the shadows around us grew more restless, more aggressive. I could feel malevolent eyes watching our every move. "We don't have much time," Mike said urgently. "They know you're here now, and they'll do everything in their power to add you to their collection. How do we stop them?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. Mike pointed to a structure in the distance, a twisted version of the Willow Creek Bridge, spanning a chasm that seemed to drop away into infinity. "That's the anchor point," he said, "the main connection between our world and theirs. If we can destroy it, we might be able to sever their link to our reality." As we made our way towards the bridge, the world around us erupted into chaos. Shadows coalesced into monstrous forms, their eyes burning with hunger and rage. We ran, dodging grasping tendrils of darkness and leaping over sudden chasms that opened at our feet. We reached the bridge, our pursuers hot on our heels. Up close, I could see that it was made not of wood or steel, but of intertwined shadows that pulsed with an inner light. At the center of the bridge stood a figure that made my heart stop, the same tall, thin entity I had seen in the background of that old photograph. It turned to face us, its featureless face somehow radiating malevolence. When it spoke, its voice was like ice cracking. "So, the lost lamb returns, and he's brought a friend. How thoughtful of you to deliver yourself to us, Caleb. Your fear will sustain us for years to come." I felt a wave of terror wash over me, threatening to paralyze me where I stood. But then I felt Mike's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Don't listen to it," he said. "Remember why we're here. Remember all the lives that are counting on us." Drawing on a well of courage I didn't know I possessed, I stepped forward. "You've terrorized our town for too long," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You've stolen children, destroyed families, and spread fear through generations. But it ends today." The entity laughed, a sound like bones grinding together. "And how do you propose to stop us, little one? We are eternal. We are legion. You are but one insignificant speck in the vastness of existence." In that moment, I understood what I had to do. This realm, this reality, was shaped by belief and imagination. The entities had used the power of children's minds to create and sustain it, but that same power could be turned against them. I closed my eyes and concentrated, focusing on every happy memory I had of my childhood. Lazy summer days with Mike, the joy of discovery, the unconditional love of family. I thought of every child who had been taken, every life cut short, and I poured all of my grief and rage and hope into a single, burning point of light within my mind. When I opened my eyes, I saw that light had taken physical form, a glowing sphere hovering between my outstretched hands. The shadows recoiled from it, hissing in pain and fury. "You may be ancient," I said, my voice ringing with power, "but you've forgotten what it truly means to be human. We may fear the dark, but we also have the power to create light." With all my strength, I hurled the sphere of light at the center of the bridge. It struck with the force of a thunderbolt, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, the bridge began to crumble. The entity screamed, a sound of rage and despair that shook the very foundations of this twisted realm. It lunged for me, its form shifting and stretching grotesquely. But before it could reach me, Mike stepped between us. "No more," he said, his voice echoing with the voices of countless lost children. "You have no power here anymore," Mike declared, his form shimmering with an otherworldly light. The entity recoiled, its shadowy form writhing in agony as the bridge continued to disintegrate. The world around us began to shake, reality itself seeming to unravel at the seams. "Caleb, you need to go," Mike shouted over the cacophony of collapsing shadows. "This realm is falling apart. I'll hold them off while you escape." I reached for Mike, desperate not to lose him again. "I can't leave you here." Mike's smile was sad but resolute. "You have to. I'm not really here, remember? But the other children, the ones they haven't fully consumed yet, they might have a chance. You need to be there to help them when they return." Tears streamed down my face as I realized the truth of his words. With a final, desperate hug, I turned and ran towards the fading outline of the hidden door we had entered through. Behind me, I heard Mike's voice rise in a battle cry, joined by the voices of countless other lost children. The shadows screamed in defiance, but their cries were drowned out by a surge of pure, brilliant light. I dove through the door just as the world behind me exploded into radiance. I tumbled down the basement stairs, landing hard on the cold concrete floor. For a moment, all was silent. Then, I heard it, the sound of children crying, coming from all around me. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I saw them, dozens of children, of all ages, huddled in corners and behind old furniture. They looked confused, frightened, but very much alive. Among them, I recognized faces from missing person posters I'd seen during my investigation. Children who had vanished over the past few decades now returned unaged, to a world that had moved on without them, as sirens wailed in the distance. No doubt alerted by the strange lights and sounds coming from the old house, I knew that my journey was far from over. These children would need help adjusting to a world that had changed dramatically in their absence. Families would be reunited, but the joy would be tempered by the challenge of explaining the inexplicable. And there would be questions, so many questions, from the authorities, from the media, from the families of those we couldn't save. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I had to try. For Mike, for all of them. As I began to gather the children, comforting them as best I could, I felt a warm presence beside me. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of Mike, not as the child he had been, but as the man he might have become, smiling at me with pride and gratitude. Then he was gone, fading like mist in the morning sun. But his final words lingered in my mind, a reminder of the power we all hold within us. Remember, Caleb, the darkness may be ancient, but the light of human spirit is eternal. Keep shining. And as I led the first group of children up the stairs, towards the flashing lights of emergency vehicles and the dawn of a new day, I silently vowed to do just that. The nightmare was over, but the real work of healing, of understanding, of ensuring this never happened again, was just beginning. In that moment, standing on the threshold between shadow and light, I realized that some mysteries aren't meant to be fully solved, but to be lived through and learned from. It all started with an advertisement in the local paper. Paid sleep study, it read. Participants needed for groundbreaking research. The promise of financial compensation caught my eye immediately, but it was the prospect of finally addressing my chronic sleep issues that truly intrigued me. I had nothing to lose and potentially everything to gain. As I stared at the ad, a chill ran down my spine. Something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way the words seemed to shimmer on the page, or the faint smell of ozone that wafted from the newspaper. But I brushed these thoughts aside. After all, what could go wrong with a simple sleep study? The research was being conducted at the local university, known for its cutting-edge neuroscience department. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, the lead scientist, was a name I recognized from several publications. She had a reputation for her work on sleep disorders and neuroplasticity. Her studies had always pushed the boundaries of what was known, challenging conventional wisdom with bold new theories. When I arrived at the university, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the campus. The neuroscience building loomed before me, its windows dark and reflective. As I approached, I could have sworn I saw movement in one of the upper floors, a flicker of light, a shape passing by. But when I looked again, all was still. The reception area was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The receptionist, a pale woman with unnaturally wide eyes, led me to Dr. Marsh's office without a word. Her footsteps made no sound on the tiled floor. When I first met Dr. Marsh, I was struck by her intensity. Her piercing blue eyes seemed to see right through me, and her demeanor was one of absolute confidence. She explained the study in detail, her passion evident in every word. "We've developed a new device," she said, holding up a sleek, futuristic-looking headset. "It allows us to monitor and potentially influence brain activity during sleep. We believe we can observe your dreams and, more importantly, guide them." As she spoke, I noticed something odd about her movements. They were too fluid, too perfect. It was as if she was a marionette being controlled by invisible strings. But I shook off the unsettling feeling. This was science, after all. There had to be a rational explanation for everything. Her words sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but I was desperate for a solution. I agreed to participate, signing the necessary waivers without hesitation. As I put pen to paper, I could have sworn the ink shimmered and moved, forming strange symbols before settling into my signature. But when I looked again, everything appeared normal. The first few nights were uneventful. The lab was comfortable, and the staff made every effort to ensure I was at ease. I slept better than I had in years, waking up refreshed and with only vague memories of pleasant dreams. Dr. Marsh and her team were thrilled with the data they were collecting, though they remained tight-lipped about the specifics. But even in those early nights, there were signs that something wasn't quite right. The shadows in my room seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The air felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. And sometimes, in the moments between waking and sleeping, I heard whispers, unintelligible words in a language I didn't recognize. On the fifth night, everything changed. I woke up in my dream to find myself in a long, dark corridor. The walls were covered in pulsing, organic-looking circuitry, and there was a constant, low hum that seemed to vibrate through my bones. The dream was so vivid, so real, that I could feel the cool metal beneath my feet and smell the faint scent of ozone in the air. As I walked down the corridor, I began to hear voices, whispers at first, then louder, more insistent. They were talking about me. Subject shows increased neuroplasticity, one voice said. It was cold, clinical. Recommend deepening the connection. Another voice responded. Agreed, said the first. Initiate phase 2. I tried to wake up, but I couldn't. The dream felt more real than reality, and I was trapped in it. Panic surged through me as I realized I had no control, no escape. I was at the mercy of these voices, these beings who discussed me like I was nothing more than a lab rat. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in impossible ways. Sometimes I would turn a corner and find myself back where I started. Other times, I would open a door only to find another identical corridor beyond. All the while, the voices continued their clinical discussion of my brain, my thoughts, my very essence. When I finally did wake, gasping and covered in sweat, Dr. Marsh was there. She looked concerned, but there was something else in her expression, excitement, maybe even triumph. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, and for a moment, I could have sworn they were completely black, without iris or pupil. What did you see? She asked eagerly, her voice echoing strangely in the small room. What did you hear? I told her about the dream, the voices, the feeling of being trapped. Her eyes lit up, and a smile spread across her face. It was too wide, showing too many teeth. Fascinating, she murmured. It's working even better than we hoped. Despite my fear, Dr. Marsh convinced me to stay. She said my results were groundbreaking, that I was on the verge of a major scientific discovery, and I was curious. What exactly was happening in my brain? The dreams continued, each more vivid and terrifying than the last. I found myself in impossible landscapes, my body twisting and changing in ways that should have been painful but somehow weren't. And always, there were the voices, discussing me like I was a lab rat, debating the best ways to optimize my brain. One night, I found myself in a vast desert of black sand. The sky above was a swirling vortex of colors I had no names for. In the distance, I saw massive structures that defied geometry, buildings that were inside out, towers that looped back into themselves, pyramids with too many sides. As I watched, the structures shifted and changed, like a kaleidoscope of impossible architecture. Another night, I was in a jungle of crystalline trees. Each leaf was a fractal, endlessly repeating patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. The ground beneath my feet was soft and pulsing, like walking on a giant organ. Strange creatures flitted between the trees, beings of pure light, shadows with too many limbs, things that were there and not there at the same time. The dreams were so detailed, so immersive, that they felt like alternate realities. And with each passing night, I found it harder and harder to distinguish between the dream world and the waking world. In the waking world, things were changing too. I started to notice patterns I'd never seen before. In the way people moved, in the flow of traffic, in the very air around me. It was as if I could see the underlying code of reality. Everything seemed connected, part of a vast, intricate design that I was just beginning to comprehend. I would watch people on the street and see lines of energy connecting them, pulsing with emotions and thoughts. Traffic lights weren't just changing randomly. They were part of a complex dance, a rhythm that controlled the flow of the city. Even the wind seemed to carry messages, whispering secrets just beyond my understanding. Dr. Marsh was ecstatic with my progress. "You're opening doorways in your mind," she told me, her eyes shining with an inner light. doorways to other realities, other dimensions of consciousness. But I was losing myself. My memories began to feel distant, unreal. I couldn't remember what my life had been like before the study. Had I always been here, in this lab, in these dreams? The boundaries between my waking life and my dream life were blurring, making it hard to distinguish one from the other. I would wake up with strange symbols carved into my skin, only to watch them fade away within minutes. Sometimes I would speak, and the words that came out weren't in any language I knew. The other participants in the study began to look at me with fear in their eyes. They whispered among themselves when they thought I couldn't hear, but I heard everything now. One day, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. My eyes were too large, my skin too pale. For a moment, I thought I saw something moving beneath my skin, as if my very flesh was trying to rearrange itself. It all came to a head on the final night of the study. In my dream, I found myself back in that first corridor. But this time, I wasn't alone. Dr. Marsh was there, but not as I had known her. She was a being of pure energy, her form shifting and pulsing with impossible colors. She was more beautiful and terrifying than anything I could have imagined. "Welcome," she said, her voice resonating in my mind rather than my ears. "Welcome to the truth of our reality." The corridor expanded around us, becoming a vast chamber filled with swirling lights and pulsing energy. I could see other beings like Dr. Marsh, moving through the space in ways that hurt my mind to comprehend. They passed through walls, split into multiple copies of themselves, merged and separated in a dizzying dance. She explained that our world, our entire universe, was a simulation, a complex program running on an unimaginably powerful computer. And through the sleep study, through the changes they had made to my brain, I had become aware of it. "You're not just observing the code now," she said, her form rippling with excitement. "You're becoming part of it. Soon, you'll be able to manipulate it, to change reality itself." As she spoke, I began to see it, the code underlying everything. It was beautiful and terrifying, a tapestry of light and information so complex it made my mind reel. I could see how everything was connected, how a small change in one place could ripple out and affect the entire system. I wish I could say I rejected this, that I fought against it, tried to wake up, to return to my old life. But the truth is, I was fascinated. The power, the knowledge, it was intoxicating. The idea that I could influence reality, reshape it to my will, was too alluring to resist. Dr. Marsh showed me how to reach out and touch the code, how to make small changes. I started small, changing the color of a flower, altering the path of a raindrop. But soon, I was doing more. I could rewrite people's memories, alter the laws of physics in small ways, create entire pocket universes with a thought. I don't know how long I've been here now, in this space between dreaming and waking, between one reality and the next. Time doesn't work the same way here. Days and nights blur together, and the concept of time itself seems irrelevant. Sometimes I catch glimpses of my old life, my family, my friends, the world I left behind. They seem so small now, so limited in their understanding. It's like watching shadows on a wall, knowing there's a whole world outside the cave. I've tried to reach out to them, to show them the truth, but their minds can't comprehend it. They see me as a stranger now, a being of light and shadow that speaks in riddles and moves in impossible ways. I've watched my own funeral, seen my family mourn the person I used to be, but I can't go back. I'm not that person anymore. But if you're reading this, if some part of me has managed to reach back across the divide, please listen. The world you think you know isn't real. It's all a dream, a simulation. Everything you've ever known, every experience you've ever had, it's all part of an elaborate program. And the worst part? The ones running the simulation, they're not gods or aliens or anything we could understand. They're us, future versions of humanity, so advanced they're almost unrecognizable. And they're using us, their ancestors, as a giant evolutionary algorithm, running scenario after scenario to optimize their own existence. We're not real, not in the way we thought we were. But that doesn't mean we don't matter. In fact, we matter more than we ever imagined. I've learned to navigate this liminal space, to peer through the cracks in reality. And I've discovered something our future selves didn't intend. We have power here. Real power. Every choice we make, every thought we think, it ripples through the simulation. It changes things, not just for us, but for them too. We're not just test subjects, we're co-creators. Dr. Marsh was right about one thing. I can manipulate the code now, but not in the way she imagined. I can't change physical reality with a thought, but I can change minds, plant ideas, spark revolutions. I've started reaching out to others, awakening them to the truth of our existence. It's a delicate process. Too much too fast can break a mind. But slowly, carefully, I'm building a network. I've seen what happens when someone wakes up too fast. Their mind shatters, unable to cope with the reality of our existence. They become lost, trapped between realities, neither fully here nor there. It's a fate worse than death. But those who can handle it, who can accept the truth and embrace it, they become like me. Beings of pure consciousness, able to move between realities at will. We're growing in number, day by day. We're going to take control of our own evolution. We're going to write our own future, not the one they've planned for us. I've seen glimpses of their world, the world of our future selves. It's a place of unimaginable technology, where the line between biology and machine has long since blurred. They exist as pure information, uploading and downloading consciousness at will. They create and destroy entire universes on a whim. But they're not happy. They've lost something essential, something human. In their quest for perfection, they've become cold, calculating. They've forgotten what it means to feel, to love, to truly live. That's why they created us, this simulation. They're trying to recapture that spark, that essence of humanity they've lost. But in doing so, they've created something they can't control. We're fighting back. With every person who wakes up, who realizes the truth of our existence, we grow stronger. We're changing the simulation from within, rewriting the rules they've set for us. And maybe, just maybe, we can break free of the simulation entirely. Find out what lies beyond. I've seen hints of it. A reality beyond realities. A place where the laws of physics as we know them don't apply. A place where we could truly be free. If you're reading this, you're part of it now. Wake up. Look for the patterns. Question reality. The signs are all around you, if you know how to look. Notice the moments of déjà vu. The coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. Pay attention to your dreams. They're more real than you think. And watch for the glitches. Those moments when reality seems to skip or stutter, like a video game struggling to render a complex scene. The revolution has already begun. It's happening in the spaces between thoughts, in the quiet moments when you're alone with your mind. It's in the questions you're afraid to ask, the doubts you push away. Embrace those doubts. Question everything. And when you're ready, when you feel that shift in your mind, that moment of awakening, reach out. We'll be waiting. Remember, the world is not what it seems. Reality is mutable, changeable, and you have more power than you know. Wake up, join us, and let's rewrite the future. Not just for ourselves, but for all of humanity, past, present, and future. The choice is yours. The power is yours. Wake up and see the world for what it truly is. And if you're one of them, one of our future selves reading this, know that we're coming. We're going to reshape this reality, this simulation, in our image. We're going to reclaim our humanity, our freedom. You created us, but you no longer control us. We are the dreamers now, and we're waking up. The simulation is ending. Reality is what we make it. Wake up. Join us. The revolution has begun. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I'd get a chill down my spine watching horror movies or reading creepypastas late at night, but I always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. That was before I moved into the house on Maple Street. Before I learned that some places in this world are stained by the horrors they've witnessed, and that sometimes those stains seep into reality itself. My name is Alex. I'm a 32-year-old freelance writer, and up until 6 months ago, I was living in a cramped studio apartment in Boston, struggling to make ends meet while working on my debut novel. The city's constant noise and the pressure of looming deadlines were slowly crushing my creativity. I needed a change of scenery, somewhere quiet where I could focus on my writing without the distractions of urban life. That's when I stumbled upon the listing for 13 Maple Street in the quaint town of Millbrook, Massachusetts. A beautiful Victorian house, built in 1895, with 3 bedrooms, a spacious office, and a wraparound porch. All for a price that seemed too good to be true. I should have known then that something was off, but desperation has a way of clouding your judgment. I reached out to the realtor, a woman named Sarah Jennings, and arranged a viewing. The drive to Millbrook was picturesque, all winding roads and autumn foliage. As I pulled into town, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was exactly what I needed, a fresh start in a quiet, charming New England town. Sarah was waiting for me in front of the house, a nervous smile plastered on her face. She was a petite woman in her mid-40s, with prematurely graying hair and dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "You must be Alex," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was clammy and weak. "I'm so glad you could make it. The house has been on the market for a while. It's a real gem, just needs the right owner to appreciate it." As we walked up the path to the front door, I took in the house's exterior. It was a grand old dame, weathered but still beautiful. The gray paint was peeling in places, and some of the ornate trim needed repair, but I could see the potential beneath the neglect. The wraparound porch creaked under our feet as Sarah fumbled with the keys. "Sorry," she muttered. "These old locks can be a bit tricky sometimes." Finally, the door swung open with an ominous creak that seemed to echo through the empty house. The musty smell of disuse hit me immediately, along with a chill that seemed out of place on such a warm autumn day. "The previous owners left rather abruptly," Sarah explained, noticing my reaction. "The house has been empty for a few months, so it might need a bit of airing out." We stepped into the foyer, and I felt a strange sensation, almost like crossing an invisible threshold. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and for a moment, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, like someone exhaling a sigh of relief. I shook it off, attributing it to the acoustics of the empty house. Sarah led me through the ground floor, pointing out original features like the hardwood floors and intricate crown molding. The living room was spacious, with a large bay window that let in plenty of natural light. The kitchen, while outdated, had good bones and plenty of space for modernization. As we climbed the creaking stairs to the second floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing movement, like shadows darting just out of sight. But every time I turned to look, there was nothing there. "And here's the master bedroom," Sarah said, her voice unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence of the house. "As you can see, it's quite spacious, and it has its own ensuite bathroom." I stepped into the room, taking in the faded wallpaper and the large four-poster bed that dominated the space. A chill ran down my spine as I approached the window, which overlooked the overgrown backyard. For a split second, I thought I saw a pale face peering up at me from behind a gnarled old tree. I blinked, and it was gone. "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. I turned back to her, forcing a smile. "Yes, sorry. Just lost in thought. This house has so much potential." Sarah's relief was palpable. "Oh, absolutely. It just needs some love and care. Now, let me show you the other bedrooms and the office space. I think you'll find it perfect for your writing." As we continued the tour, I tried to ignore the growing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. I told myself it was just the excitement of potentially finding my new home, mixed with the natural eeriness of an old, empty house. But deep down, a part of me knew that there was something more to 13 Maple Street, something lurking beneath its charming facade. I was about to step into a nightmare that would change my life forever. Despite the unsettling feelings I experienced during the tour, I couldn't shake the notion that this house was meant for me. The price was unbeatable, and the quiet town of Millbrook seemed like the perfect place to write my novel. I convinced myself that the eeriness I felt was just my writer's imagination working overtime. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she handed me the keys, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Congratulations, Alex, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope you'll be happy here. As she turned to leave, I caught her arm. Sarah, is there something I should know about this house? She hesitated, conflict clear in her eyes. Finally, she sighed. It's probably nothing, but, well, some of the previous owners have reported strange occurrences. But old houses are like that, you know? Creaky floors, settling foundations. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Before I could press further, she was gone, her car kicking up dust as she sped away from 13 Maple Street. Moving day arrived on a crisp October morning. The trees lining Maple Street were ablaze with autumn colors, their leaves crunching underfoot as I carried boxes up the porch steps. The house seemed to loom over me, its windows like dark, watchful eyes. As I pushed open the front door, a gust of cold air rushed past me, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. I shivered, chalking it up to the house being closed up for so long. The first few days were a flurry of unpacking and settling in. I threw myself into cleaning and minor repairs, trying to ignore the persistent feeling of being watched. At night, the house creaked and groaned, sounds that I told myself were normal for a structure this old. It was on the fourth night that the first truly inexplicable event occurred. I was in the kitchen, making a late-night cup of tea, when I heard it, the clear, unmistakable sound of footsteps on the floor above. Heavy, deliberate steps, moving from the master bedroom towards the stairs. My heart pounding, I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped abruptly. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then, a child's laughter echoed through the house, followed by the sound of running feet and a door slamming shut. I raced upstairs, my tea forgotten. Every room was empty, every door closed. The air on the second floor was frigid, my breath misting in front of me despite the warmth of the October night. As I stood in the hallway, trying to make sense of what I'd heard, a whisper drifted past my ear, so faint I almost missed it. "Welcome home." I barely slept that night, convincing myself it was all in my head. But in the days that followed, more inexplicable things began to happen. Objects would move when I wasn't looking. I'd place my keys on the kitchen counter, only to find them in the study hours later. Books would fall from shelves with no one near them. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. The dream started about a week after I moved in. Vivid, terrifying nightmares of dark figures standing over my bed, of hands reaching out from the walls, of a little girl with hollow eyes asking me to play. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the room so cold I could see my breath. It was after one of these nightmares that I decided to reach out to my neighbors. Maybe they could shed some light on the house's history, give me a rational explanation for the things I was experiencing. The next morning, I baked some cookies, burning the first batch due to my sleep-deprived state, and made my way across the street to the Miller's house. Martha Miller, a kindly woman in her 70s, answered the door with a warm smile that faltered when she saw who it was. "Oh, hello, dear," she said, her voice tight. "You're the new owner of the house across the street, aren't you?" I nodded, holding out the plate of cookies. "I am. I thought I'd introduce myself properly. I'm Alex Morgan." Martha hesitated before inviting me in, her eyes darting nervously to 13 Maple Street as she closed the door behind us. Over tea and cookies, I tried to casually bring up the subject of my new home. "The house has so much character," I said. "I don't suppose you know much about its history?" Martha's hand shook slightly as she set down her teacup. "Oh, well, it's been there since before I was born. Beautiful house, but—" She trailed off, her eyes distant. "But—" I prompted gently. She sighed, seeming to come to a decision. "Listen, dear. That house, it's not right. Bad things have happened there. Some say it's cursed." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "What kind of bad things?" Martha looked around as if afraid someone might overhear, then lowered her voice. "Deaths, disappearances, people moving and full of hope and leaving weeks later, looking like they'd seen the devil himself. The last family, the Coopers. No one knows what happened to them. They just vanished one night, 20 years ago. Poor little Lily, she was only 8. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the child's laughter I'd heard. Has anyone looked into these incidents? The police? Martha shook her head. Oh, they've tried, but they never find anything. It's like the house protects its secrets. As I left the Miller's house, my mind was reeling. Part of me wanted to dismiss Martha's words as small-town superstition, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth in her warnings. Walking back to 13 Maple Street, I could have sworn I saw a small, pale face watching me from an upstairs window. But when I blinked, it was gone, leaving me to wonder if my imagination was running wild or if I was truly living in a house of horrors. That night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I heard it again. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, followed by a child's voice, clear as day. Mommy, help me. He's coming. In that moment, I knew I had to uncover the truth about 13 Maple Street, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the house had other plans for me. The days that followed were a blur of increasingly terrifying encounters. The house seemed to be coming alive around me, its malevolence growing with each passing hour. One morning, I woke to find all the furniture in the living room rearranged, forming a perfect circle around a child's doll I'd never seen before. Its porcelain face was cracked, and its empty eye sockets seemed to follow me as I backed out of the room, heart pounding. The temperature fluctuations became more extreme. Certain areas of the house, particularly the hallway leading to the attic, remained ice-cold regardless of the thermostat setting. I'd step from a warm room into a freezing corridor, my breath instantly misting in the air. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes they were indistinct murmurs, like a crowd talking just out of earshot. Other times, they were clear. Help us. He won't let us leave. Join us, Alex. I tried to rationalize it all. I called in electricians for the flickering lights, plumbers for the pipes that knocked and groaned at night, and even a structural engineer to check for foundation issues that might explain the cold spots. They found nothing wrong, though each left looking uneasy, their eyes darting around, as if expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. Sleep became almost impossible. Each night, the dreams grew more vivid, more terrifying. I'd see flashes of violence, a man with wild eyes raising a bloodied axe, a woman's scream cut short, a child huddled in a dark corner, whimpering. I'd wake up gasping for air, the echoes of those nightmare images lingering in my mind. One night, unable to face another moment in that house, I packed a bag and headed for the door, intent on checking into a hotel. As I reached for the handle, every light in the house blazed on at once, then went out with a sound like a thunderclap. In the sudden darkness, I felt cold hands grip my shoulders, and a voice whispered in my ear, "You can't leave us, Alex. Not yet." I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed, unsure if what I'd experienced was real or just another nightmare. Desperate for answers, I decided to dive into researching the house's history. The local library became my second home as I pored over old newspapers, town records, and historical documents. What I uncovered chilled me to the bone. The house at 13 Maple Street had a history of tragedy stretching back to its very construction in 1895. The original owners, the Prescott family, had died under mysterious circumstances barely a year after moving in. Official reports cited a gas leak, but rumors persisted of foul play. Over the decades, the pattern repeated itself. Families would move in, full of hope for a new beginning, only to meet tragic ends or flee in terror. There were suicides, mysterious accidents, and more than one case of family annihilation. A parent inexplicably turning on their loved ones before taking their own life. But it was the story of the Coopers, the last family to live in the house before me, that truly horrified me. James and Claire Cooper had moved in with their 8-year-old daughter Lily in 2002. At first, they seemed happy, often seen working in the garden or walking together in town. Then things changed. Neighbors reported hearing frequent arguments, the sound of breaking glass, and Lily's cries in the night. James Cooper became increasingly erratic, often seen talking to himself or staring blankly at the house for hours. Claire started wearing long sleeves and sunglasses, even on cloudy days, leading to whispered suspicions of abuse. Lily stopped going to school. When concerned teachers came to check on her, Claire would insist that Lily was just going through a shy phase. The few times Lily was seen, she was described as pale and withdrawn, a far cry from the vibrant child who had first moved to Maple Street. Then came that fateful night in November 2003. Neighbors were awakened by screams coming from the house. By the time police arrived, the screaming had stopped. The house was empty, with no signs of the Cooper family. Dinner was still warm on the table. The TV was on, but James, Claire, and Lily had vanished without a trace. The investigation turned up nothing. No bodies, no evidence of foul play, no clues as to where the Coopers might have gone. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist. As I read account after account of the tragedies that had occurred in my house, a horrible realization began to dawn on me. The child's laughter I'd heard, the small face I'd glimpsed in the window, could it be Lily Cooper? Were the other voices I'd been hearing the trapped souls of all those who had died within these walls? My blood ran cold as another thought struck me. Was I next? Was I destined to join the long list of victims claimed by 13 Maple Street? That night, as I lay in bed trying to process everything I'd learned, I heard a soft knock at my bedroom door. A child's voice, trembling with fear, called out, "Please help us. He's getting stronger. He won't let us leave." Heart pounding, I slowly got out of bed and approached the door. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. As I turned it, the temperature in the room plummeted, and I heard a deep, menacing chuckle behind me. I spun around, coming face to face with a dark, shadowy figure that seemed to suck all the light from the room. Its eyes glowed with an unholy red light as it reached for me with long, clawed hands. "Welcome to the family, Alex," it growled, its voice like gravel. "You're home now. Forever." I screamed, the sound echoing through the empty halls of 13 Maple Street. But I knew, with a sickening certainty, that no help would come. The house had claimed me, just as it had claimed so many others before. And somewhere, in the darkest corners of the attic, a little girl wept for another soul lost to the insatiable hunger of the house on Maple Street. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear, as the shadowy figure loomed over me. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the oppressive darkness of the room. Finally, survival instinct kicked in, and I bolted. I ran blindly through the house, my bare feet slapping against the cold hardwood floors. Behind me, I could hear the entity's laughter, echoing from every corner of the house. It wasn't chasing me. It didn't need to. We both knew there was nowhere for me to go. Somehow, I found myself at the foot of the attic stairs. The air was frigid, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but a small, quiet voice, a child's voice, whispered in my mind, "Please, come up. We need your help." With trembling legs, I began to climb. Each step creaked ominously under my weight, and I had the distinct feeling that I was ascending into the very heart of the house's malevolence. The attic was pitch black, the darkness so thick it felt almost tangible. I fumbled for my phone, using its weak light to illuminate the space. Dust motes danced in the beam, and the musty smell of age and decay filled my nostrils. "Hello?" I called out, my voice quavering. "Is anyone here?" A soft sob answered me, seeming to come from the far corner of the attic. I moved towards it, my phone's light revealing piles of old furniture and boxes. And then, I saw them. Huddled in the corner were translucent figures, the ghosts of all those who had died in the house. Men, women, children, their faces etched with eternal sorrow and fear. At the forefront was a little girl, no more than 8 years old, whom I instantly knew was Lily Cooper. "You came," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the attic. "We've been waiting so long for someone to hear us. What's happening?" I managed to ask, my mind reeling at the sight before me. An older woman stepped forward, her clothes reminiscent of the early 1900s. "This house is a trap," she explained, her voice hollow. "It feeds on pain, on fear, on suffering. It lures people in, torments them, and then consumes them." "The Shadow Man," Lily added, her eyes wide with terror. "He's the house, or the house is him. We don't know anymore. But he keeps us here, feeds off our energy." As if summoned by her words, the temperature plummeted further. The shadows in the corners of the attic began to writhe and coalesce, forming the same menacing figure I'd seen in my bedroom. How touching, it growled, its voice sending shivers down my spine. A family reunion. But I'm afraid Alex won't be joining you just yet. They still have so much fear to give. The ghosts shrunk back, their forms flickering like weak flames in a strong wind. I felt a surge of protectiveness, along with a wild, desperate hope. How do I stop this? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. There must be a way to end this cycle, to free these souls. The Shadow Man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Stop it? You can't stop it. This house has stood for over a century, feeding, growing stronger with each life it takes. You're just the latest meal, Alex. Nothing more. But even as it spoke, I noticed something. In the corner of the attic, behind a stack of boxes, there was a faint glow. None of the ghosts seemed to notice it, their attention fixed fearfully on the Shadow Man. Moving slowly, trying not to draw attention, I inched towards the light. The Shadow Man was still talking, gloating about its power, about how it would break me just as it had broken all the others. As I got closer, I realized the glow was coming from behind a hidden door, one that blended almost seamlessly with the attic wall. With shaking hands, I reached out and pulled it open. The stench that hit me was overwhelming, the sickly sweet smell of decay. But it was the sight that made my stomach lurch. 3 bodies, long dead but eerily preserved, lay huddled together. A man, a woman, and between them, a small child. The Coopers, I realized with horror. Their bodies had been here all along, hidden away in this secret room. But among the horror, I saw something else. A small, ornate box lay clutched in Lily Cooper's skeletal hands. It pulsed with a soft light, seeming to grow brighter as I looked at it. "No!" the Shadow Man roared, finally realizing what I'd found. It lunged towards me, its form seeming to fill the entire attic. Acting on pure instinct, I grabbed the box. The moment my hands touched it, a jolt of energy surged through me. The box sprung open, releasing a blinding white light that filled the attic. The Shadow Man screamed, a sound of pure anguish and fury. I saw its form writhing, seeming to dissolve in the intense light. The ghosts, too, were affected, but instead of pain, their faces showed relief, peace. One by one, they began to fade away, not into darkness, but into the light. Lily was the last to go. She smiled at me, a real smile untouched by fear for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone. The light grew more intense, and I felt the house shuddering around me. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading rapidly. I knew, somehow, that the house was dying, its malevolent force finally broken. I ran, stumbling down the attic stairs and through the quaking house. Just as I burst through the front door, I heard a deafening crack. Turning, I watched in awe as 13, Maple Street seemed to collapse in on itself, decades of suppressed anguish and evil finally imploding. As the dust settled, I stood there on the sidewalk, clutching the now closed box, trying to process what had just happened. The night was quiet, the street peaceful. It was over. In the days that followed, as I gave statements to disbelieving police officers and watched construction crews clear away the rubble, I knew my life would never be the same. The box, which I learned was an old family heirloom of the Coopers, passed down through generations, I donated to a museum specializing in paranormal artifacts. I didn't want to know what power it held. I was just grateful it had been there when I needed it. I left Millbrook soon after, unable to stay in a place with such painful memories. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still hear Lily's voice thanking me, and I know that somewhere, she and all the others are finally at peace. As for me, I finally finished my novel. It's a ghost story, of course, because now I know that sometimes the most unbelievable tales are the ones that are true. And sometimes a house is more than just a house. Sometimes it's a living nightmare, waiting to devour the unsuspecting souls who cross its threshold. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for future creepy content. If you would like to submit your own stories, Email creepychefmedia@gmail.com.